The Princess's Curse. The empire of Zaloria stretched across the stars like a living shadow. Its fleets ruled the void, its armies crushed all who resisted, and its throne stood as a symbol of eternal power. Yet even the mightiest of thrones trembled when no heir was promised to sit upon it. In the golden chamber of the royal palace, high above the shining capital world, the alien king watched his daughter. She was the only child he had, the only one who could carry the royal blood into the future. The princess, known across the empire for her beauty, carried something heavier than her crown of emerald metal. She carried a curse that her people whispered about in silence. She could not bear children. It was spoken in secret, yet the rumor spread through the court like fire through dry grass. Ministers exchanged looks when she entered the hall. Warriors who had once sworn loyalty lowered their eyes in pity. The royal bloodline was fading, and the empire trembled at the thought. For without an heir, the throne would one day fall into chaos. The king was a figure of iron and fire. He had led armies, destroyed worlds, and broken rebellions with the force of his will. Yet in the quiet of his throne chamber, when no one else was present, even he felt the chill of despair. His daughter's silence hurt him more than the blades of 1,000 enemies. The Princess Elindra knew what they said. She felt it in the way courtiers smiled too quickly. She saw it in the way guards whispered when she passed. She was the barren flower of Zaloria, beautiful but without fruit, cursed to leave the throne empty. For years she carried her shame alone. She walked the crystal gardens where stars shone through the ceiling of glass. She listened to the songs of alien birds imported from dying worlds. She touched the cold stones of ancient statues, kings and queens who had ruled before her. And every time she asked herself the same question, why had fate chosen her for this burden? The king brought healers from across the empire. Some were masters of genetics, some wielded ancient magic, some claimed they could rewrite life itself. But each time they failed. Each time the king's hope died a little more. Each time Elindra's heart grew heavier. The curse became the chain that bound her life. It was not her fault, but she carried the blame. In the dark she cried where no one could see. She wanted to believe she was more than her womb, more than the whispers of the court. But the silence of the palace told her otherwise, and then the humans came. They arrived not as conquerors, but as traders, explorers, and wanderers. They were weaker than the Zalorians, shorter-lived, fragile in body, yet there was something strange about them that unsettled the court. They were bold. They did not kneel as easily as other species. They spoke with a confidence that made even the generals pause. The princess saw them from afar at first. Pale figures in simple clothes standing before the throne, speaking without fear. She wondered what gave them such strength when their bodies were so weak. The court laughed at them, but the laughter was uneasy. The humans did not seem to care for the mockery. Among them was one who caught her eye. Not for his strength, for he had little compared to the alien warriors who surrounded her every day. Not for his wealth, for he had none. He caught her eye because he looked at her differently. Where her people saw a broken princess, he saw only a woman standing alone. He did not bow as low as the others. He did not look away when her emerald eyes met his. He did not whisper about her curse because he did not know it, or perhaps because he did not care. In his gaze there was no pity, only curiosity, and something else she had not seen in years, respect. That night Elindra could not sleep. She thought of his eyes, steady and unbroken, and she felt a fire in her chest that had long been cold. Days passed. She found excuses to see him again. At first it was in the halls of trade, where humans bartered goods from distant stars. Then it was in the gardens where he asked questions about the empire with a voice that did not tremble. Finally, it was in secret chambers where no guards followed. Their worlds were different, their blood could never mix, and their union was unthinkable. Yet every time he spoke, she felt a strength she had never known. He told her of human stories, of people who rose from nothing, of lives that found meaning not through birthright, but through struggle. For the first time in her life, Elindra felt that her curse did not define her, but shadows were always near. The king had eyes everywhere. Whispers reached him of his daughter walking too often in the gardens, of her laughter in the halls where there should have been silence. Ministers hinted at her growing closeness to a human, and their voices carried poison. The king grew suspicious. He ordered her watched more closely. He warned her of betrayal, of shame, of weakness. He spoke as a father and as a king, and his words were heavy with rage. But Elindra did not stop, because in her heart, something had already begun to change. Something impossible, something forbidden, something that could either save the throne or destroy it forever. The forbidden bond. The days of the Zalorian court passed in gold and steel, yet the princess felt as if her world had turned into something new. Where once she walked with her head bowed in silence, now she moved with secret purpose. Every step brought her closer to the human who had changed the way she looked at herself. His name was Marcus. Among humans, it was not a name of kings or prophets, but in Elindra's heart it grew heavy with meaning. He carried himself with no crown, no armor, no mark of greatness. Yet his words reached deeper into her spirit than any court sermon or ritual ever had. They spoke in gardens where glowing vines curled under the alien sky. They spoke in abandoned halls where the echoes of forgotten kings still lingered. They spoke in whispers, always in whispers, for the walls of the palace carried secrets faster than any wind. At first, Elindra tested him. She asked questions of power, of war, of bloodlines. She wanted to see if he would bend under the weight of the empire. But Marcus never bent. He said power was not measured by the throne you sat on, but by the choices you made when you were weakest. He said war was not glory, only sorrow carved into the bones of the living. He said bloodlines were chains, and that true worth came from what a person built with their own hands. His words burned in her chest. No Zalorian prince, no general, no noble had ever spoken to her like that. They only told her what she could not be, what she lacked, what curse she carried. But Marcus spoke as if she was not broken at all. Still, fear never left her. She knew the eyes of her father were everywhere. The alien king trusted no one, not even his blood. Already she had noticed the subtle changes. Guards that lingered longer at her doors. Ministers who watched too closely when she smiled. She had lived in the shadow of pity all her life. But this was different. This was suspicion, and suspicion in Zaloria was often punished with blood. One evening, as the twin moons rose above the capital, Elindra met Marcus in the lower chambers of the palace. There the air was cool, carrying the scent of iron and dust from ancient catacombs. He waited by a column carved with runes so old that even the scholars no longer knew their meaning. "You should not be here," she whispered, her voice trembling, though not from fear of him. "You asked me to come," he said softly, his human voice steady, unshaken by the weight of the palace above them. She wanted to deny it, to tell him it was a mistake, but her hands betrayed her, reaching for his before her mind could speak. His fingers were rough, scarred from work she could not imagine, and yet his touch was warmer than any flame. "Do you know what they call me?" she asked him. "Yes," he answered. He had heard the whispers in the marketplace, the cruel names traded behind closed doors. "But I do not believe them." "You should," she said bitterly, "because it is true. I am cursed. I am empty. I am the reason my father fears the future." Marcus looked at her as though the words were smoke. A curse is only a word people use when they cannot understand the truth. "You are not empty, Elindra. I see more fire in you than in the armies of your father." She turned away, unable to face his eyes. No one had ever spoken her name like that, without pity, without scorn, without fear. It was dangerous to hear such words, dangerous to believe them. But they planted themselves in her heart like seeds in dry earth. They met again and again. Each meeting was stolen from the grip of the Empire, a secret rebellion in the heart of the throne world. She told him of the burden of her name. He told her of Earth, of cities that stretched into the sky, of oceans that swallowed the horizon, of people who rose from nothing to shape their own destinies. She laughed at his stories, though she had long forgotten how to laugh. But as the days turned into weeks, something else began to grow within her. A faint warmth, strange and unfamiliar, stirred in her body. At first she thought it was nothing more than a dream born of stolen affection. Yet as time passed, the truth began to take shape, terrifying and impossible. One night, in the silence of her chamber, Elindra pressed her hand against her stomach. A rhythm pulsed beneath her fingers, so soft she wondered if she had imagined it. But no, there it was again, a heartbeat where there should have been none. She froze. Her breath caught. Her mind reeled. It was impossible. Every healer, every oracle, every scientist had sworn it. She could never bear life. Her body was incapable of it. And yet, there beneath her hand, life stirred. Her secret meetings with Marcus had created something that defied the laws of her people. something that would shatter the Empire if it were ever known. Tears fell silently down her face. For the first time in her life, she did not feel cursed. For the first time, she felt chosen, but the danger was greater than she could imagine. Already, the court whispered louder. The king's advisors spoke of her absence from the great halls, of her fading silence, of her secret movements. The king himself began to wonder if his daughter had betrayed him in ways more terrible than he feared. Elindra tried to hide it. She cloaked herself in shadows, avoided the eyes of her servants, and met Marcus only in the deepest corners of the palace. But life cannot be hidden forever. Her loyal handmaiden, the one who had served her since childhood, entered her chamber one morning and froze at the sight of Elindra's trembling hands upon her stomach. Their eyes met, and in that silence the truth was shared without a word. The handmaiden gasped. Her voice shook. "Princess, you are with child." Elindra's heart pounded like thunder. She wanted to deny it, but the warmth in her belly gave her no escape. "Yes," she whispered, "and it is his." The handmaiden's face turned pale, torn between loyalty and terror. For if the king discovered this secret, not only would Marcus be executed, but Elindra herself would face judgment beyond mercy. And yet, as Elindra placed her hand upon the faint heartbeat again, she knew there was no turning back. This was no longer just a forbidden bond. This was the beginning of something that could either save the Empire or destroy it completely. The heir that should not exist. The palace of Zaloria was built to hold secrets, but no walls could hide what now grew within the princess. Elindra carried life where there should have been none, and every passing day the truth pressed harder against the veil of silence she had woven. Her handmaiden, loyal yet terrified, hovered near her at every moment. She begged Elindra to tell no one, to hide until the danger passed, but the princess knew such a hope was fragile. A kingdom fed on whispers, and whispers had already begun to thicken in the air like smoke before fire. In the council chambers, ministers leaned close, speaking in hushed tones. They wondered why the princess no longer walked freely in the gardens. They wondered why her skin glowed brighter, her eyes sharper, her steps slower. Some claimed she was ill. Others whispered darker things, that perhaps forbidden magic had touched her, or that she had hidden shame within her chamber walls. The king listened, his face carved from stone. Each word of rumor hammered deeper into his suspicions. He had always believed his daughter was weak, bound by her curse, unable to carry the throne into the future. Yet something had changed in her, and he could not ignore the unease stirring among his people. Meanwhile, Elindra's bond with Marcus deepened. They met in silence under the watch of stars hidden by palace glass. He placed his rough hand over hers, feeling the faint rhythm beneath her skin. His eyes widened with awe. "This should not be," he whispered. "Yet it is. Elindra, you carry a miracle." She shivered at his words. Miracle to him, but to her father it would be a crime beyond forgiveness. "If he learns the truth," she said, voice trembling, "he will not see a miracle. He will see betrayal." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Then we must protect what you carry, no matter the cost." But how could they protect against an empire? The king commanded fleets and armies. He could erase worlds with a single gesture. Against such power, two hearts in love were nothing but sparks in a storm. Elindra's handmaiden grew restless. One night she fell to her knees before the princess, eyes full of fear. "My lady," she begged, "let me flee with this secret. If I remain, I will betray you by accident. Someone will see my fear and tear the truth from me. Please, I beg you, release me from your service." Elindra's heart ached, but she agreed. Better to lose a friend than risk the life that grew within her. The handmaiden vanished into the night, carrying silence with her, but Elindra knew even this was not safety. Silence could break, and it did. Within days, the court was buzzing louder than ever. Servants carried tales of strange herbs delivered to the princess's chamber. Guards muttered about her absence from royal ceremonies. Ministers noticed her father's growing rage as he demanded answers his daughter refused to give. Finally, the storm broke. One morning, as pale light bled through the tall windows, the king himself entered Elindra's chamber. His footsteps struck the marble floor like falling blades. His cloak swept the ground, trailing shadows, and his eyes blazed with suspicion. Elindra froze. She had expected this moment, but still her breath caught. Her father looked at her not as a father, but as a sovereign hunting treachery. "You hide from me," he said, his voice low but filled with thunder. "My blood, my heir, my shame. You close your doors, you vanish from my halls, and you think I will not notice? She lowered her gaze. The truth pulsed within her, and for the first time she felt the child move faintly, as if it too feared the wrath of the king. "Answer me," he demanded. "What secret do you hold that even I, your father, cannot see?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Marcus had told her to be strong, but strength fled under the weight of her father's fury. Still, silence was worse. "It is nothing, my lord," she whispered at last. The king stepped closer, his hand rising to seize her chin, forcing her eyes to meet his. "Do not lie to me. I smell it in the air. I see it in your face. You are changed. Tell me, child of mine, what have you done?" Before she could answer, movement stirred at the doorway. Marcus had slipped past guards, his presence bold, reckless, defiant. He stepped into the chamber, standing firm between the king and Elindra. The king's eyes flared with disbelief and rage. "You," he spat. "A human dares stand in my chamber?" Marcus did not bow. His voice was steady. "I stand because she needs me, and because the truth will not stay hidden forever." The chamber fell silent. The words hung like a blade. The king turned back to his daughter, and his gaze sharpened like steel. Slowly, with terrible certainty, he understood. His only daughter. His cursed heir. His bloodline shamed not by emptiness, but by the life she now carried. A life born not of Zaloria, but of humanity. The king's face darkened. He did not roar, he did not strike, but his silence was heavier than any blade. At last he spoke. "You carry what should not exist, an heir of my throne born of a lesser creature. You shame me, Elindra. You shame the Empire." Elindra's breath faltered, but her voice found a trembling strength. "I carry life, father. Something you thought impossible. Do not call it shame. Call it miracle." The king's eyes burned with fire. "Miracle? No, this is treason. And for treason there is only one punishment." He raised his hand, summoning guards who rushed into the chamber, weapons drawn. The air crackled with dread. Marcus stepped forward, fists clenched, unarmed yet unafraid. Elindra reached for her stomach, terror surging through her veins. For in that moment the fate of her child, her love, and her empire hung by the edge of her father's wrath. The king's wrath, the throne world of Zaloria, had seen many storms. Armies had marched through its shining gates, rebels had bled upon its marble floors, and kings had carved their fury into stone. Yet never had the palace felt such stillness as when the alien king raised his hand against his only daughter. The guards closed in like wolves. Their armor gleamed black beneath the chamber's cold light. Their weapons hummed with power, aimed at the human who stood unflinching before them. Marcus had no blade, no shield, no armor of steel. All he had was his voice, steady as a rock in the storm. "If you strike me," he said, his words cutting the silence, "you will not erase the truth. The child exists. It is living proof that your empire is not as strong as it thinks. You cannot kill what already breathes." The king's eyes narrowed into fire. "You dare speak of my blood as if it belongs to you? You, a creature of dust whose kind crawl at the edges of the stars?" His voice rose, booming across the chamber. "You are nothing, and nothing cannot sit upon the throne of Zaloria." But Elindra stepped forward, trembling yet defiant. "Father," she said, her voice breaking, "it is not nothing. It is life, it is mine. It is the heir you thought I could never give." The king turned on her with the weight of centuries in his stare. "No heir born of filth shall ever claim my throne." His words struck like knives, but Elindra did not retreat. She wrapped her arms across her stomach as though her body itself was a shield. The court was soon filled with whispers. Ministers gathered at the edge of the chamber, eyes wide, lips trembling. Some gasped in horror. Others watched with hunger, sensing that the foundation of power was cracking before them. The king raised his hand again, but not to his daughter. His voice thundered. "Take the human, end him. End the abomination within her before it poisons our line." The guards surged forward. Elindra screamed, her cry echoing against the gilded walls. Marcus stepped in front of her, bracing himself though he carried no weapon. Blades of energy drew close, sparking in the air. Then something unexpected happened. One of the guards froze. His weapon wavered. His eyes, hidden behind the black mask, flickered with doubt. A second guard hesitated as well, lowering his blade for only a moment. The hesitation rippled through the ranks like a crack in glass. Because even among the king's warriors the word had spread. The princess carried life. A life no healer, no sorcerer, no science of Zaloria had ever been able to create. A life that should not exist, yet did. Some saw shame. Others saw destiny. The king noticed their hesitation and his fury deepened. "Obey your king," he roared. "Strike them down." But Alindra's voice rose above his. It was the first time she had ever shouted against her father. "You call it shame, but they see what you refuse to see. They see hope." Her words rang in the chamber, louder than swords, sharper than fear. Marcus took her hand, squeezing it as the guards faltered. His voice was softer, but no less steady. "They cannot unmake what has already begun. The child is coming, king or no king." The king's fury boiled over. He drew his own blade, a weapon forged from the heart of a dead star, its edge glowing with molten fire. Ministers gasped as the king himself, who had crushed rebellions with words alone, now chose to draw steel against his own blood. "You defy me," he hissed, stepping closer. "Both of you. You spit upon my crown, then die with your treachery." The blade rose. The chamber trembled. Alindra shut her eyes, holding Marcus's hand tighter, bracing for the end. But before the strike could fall, a voice broke through the hall. "Stop." It came from one of the ministers, an elder cloaked in silver, a man who had served 3 generations of kings. His voice carried not fear but authority. "If you kill them now, you kill the only chance this throne has left." The chamber fell silent again. The king froze mid-strike, blade still burning. He turned slowly, his fury shifting toward the minister. "You dare question me?" The elder bowed his head slightly, but his voice did not shake. "I do not question, my king, I warn. The people already whisper. They speak of miracle, not treason. If you strike down your daughter, they will not see strength. They will see a tyrant who destroyed his own blood to preserve pride. The empire will fracture, the throne will bleed, and your name will rot in history." The king's blade trembled in his hand. His rage was unmatched, but even he could feel the truth in the words. The throne did not rest on steel alone, it rested on belief. If belief cracked, even fleets could not hold an empire together. Alindra opened her eyes. Her father still stood before her, weapon raised, face twisted in fury. But he did not strike. He could not. "Take them," he spat at last, his voice low and venomous. "Lock them away until I decide how they will die." Guards moved in again, no longer striking but seizing. Marcus was dragged in chains, his eyes never leaving Alindra's. She too was taken, her hands clutched desperately over her stomach as if to shield the life inside. As the door slammed shut behind them, the ministers and guards remained in uneasy silence. The king returned to his throne, his blade still burning, but his eyes clouded with something far more dangerous than rage. Fear, because for the first time, the king of Zaloria was not certain he controlled his empire. The heir's legacy, the dungeons beneath the palace, were carved from stone older than the empire itself. Cold walls swallowed every whisper, iron doors sealed every hope, and the air smelled of dust and forgotten blood. Here the king had thrown rebels, traitors, and broken enemies. Now his own daughter sat in the dark, her hands folded over the life that should never have been. Marcus sat across from her, bound in heavy chains. His face was bruised from the guards, but his eyes still burned with the same fire. Even in chains, he did not look defeated. Alindra leaned close, her voice a whisper. "They will kill us. They will kill the child." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Not if the people speak first." Above them, the palace stirred with unrest. Word of the princess's secret had escaped the chamber like a flood. Servants whispered to soldiers, soldiers whispered to ministers, and ministers carried the whispers to the city. Soon the whole capital murmured the same impossible truth. The barren princess carried an heir, and that heir was half human. Some spat in anger. They called it poison, corruption, betrayal of the royal blood. But others, many others, saw it differently. They had long lived under the weight of the king's pride, long suffered beneath his iron crown. To them, this child was not shame. It was proof that change could come, that life could rise where death had been promised. In the dungeons, Alindra's hand pressed again to her stomach. The heartbeat within her grew stronger each day, steady and undeniable. She looked at Marcus, and for the first time in her life she smiled through her fear. "Our child is real. Nothing he does can take that away." Footsteps echoed through the halls. The dungeon doors opened, and to their shock, it was not guards who entered, but soldiers with no royal banners on their armor. One stepped forward, lowering his weapon. His voice was steady but filled with reverence. "Princess," he whispered, "we cannot let you die here. Too many already believe the child is the future. Elindra's heart pounded. You would defy the king? The soldier nodded once. Not for ourselves. For the Empire. Chains fell. Marcus rose, rubbing his wrists, and for a moment the darkness of the dungeon seemed to break. Elindra stood tall, though her body trembled. Together with silent allies, they slipped into the night of the palace. Above, the king sat alone on his throne. Ministers argued in his court, voices clashing like blades. Some demanded death for the princess and her human consort. Others begged for mercy, fearing rebellion if blood was spilled. The king listened, but his thoughts were drowned by the same image, the child. A child born of two worlds. A child he had not chosen, yet one who might one day claim his crown. He clenched his fists. He had crushed rebellions, shattered fleets, silenced entire races. But how did a king crush blood of his own blood? How did he erase the heartbeat of his line? The answer came with the sound of drums. Outside the palace, crowds had gathered. Voices rose in chants, echoing across the city of marble and steel. The heir lives! The heir lives, the king's rage ignited. He stormed to his balcony and glared at the sea of faces below. How dare they choose miracle over loyalty, hope over obedience? He raised his hand to summon guards to drown the city in fire, but before he could give the order, the doors behind him opened. Elindra stood there. Marcus by her side. Soldiers loyal not to the king but to the heir filled the chamber behind them. The ministers gasped, retreating in fear as the princess walked forward, her emerald eyes shining like stars. Father, she said, her voice strong. Your throne no longer belongs to fear. It belongs to life. The king's blade appeared in his hand once more, blazing with the fire of a dead star. He pointed it at her, his voice like thunder. You think you can take my crown with a half-blood child? You think this empire will bow to weakness? Elindra's hand rested on her stomach and the chamber fell silent. The faint rhythm of the child's heartbeat echoed in the stillness, a sound so small yet so powerful that even the walls seemed to tremble. No, she said. They will not bow to weakness. They will bow to strength they have never seen before, strength born of two worlds. Marcus stepped forward, his chains still clattering at his wrists. You cannot fight the future. You can only choose whether to stand against it or stand with it. The king's fury shook him. He lifted his blade high, ready to cut down his own daughter, but the guards behind her raised their weapons too, not at her but at him. Ministers fell to their knees, whispering prayers to whatever god still listened. Outside, the crowd roared, voices crashing like waves against the palace walls. For the first time in his life, the king felt something heavier than rage. He felt fear. His arm wavered. His blade dimmed. And in that moment of hesitation, Elindra's voice struck him like a final blow. You can kill us, father, but you cannot kill destiny. The heir lives, and no throne in the universe is strong enough to stop that. The king's blade fell, not on her but to the ground. Its fire sputtered out as his shoulders sagged beneath the weight of his defeat. The chamber erupted with shouts. Some cheered, some wept, some fled in terror of what would come next. Elindra stepped forward, her head high, her hand on her stomach. The child within her, once thought impossible, had become the Empire's greatest truth. The heir's legacy had begun, and nothing, neither a king nor a crown, could stop it.